Tonight on Primetime, President Trump rolled out the White House red carpet for Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. It was a meeting of bold pledges, from F-35 jets to talk of $1 trillion investments, but the pomp masks enduring tensions, peace in the Middle East, relations with Iran, and lingering questions about Jamal Khashoggi still looming large. It's all about deals, defense, and diplomacy. Good evening. Tonight we unpack 5 key takeaways from this landmark meeting. Potential Saudi-Israel rapprochement, a major new US-Saudi defense pact, possible F-35 sales, Riyadh's $1 trillion investment pledge in the US, a number which keeps rising seemingly, and a softening tone towards Iran. But first, this report.
In a lavish ceremony at the White House, U.S. President Donald Trump welcomed Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, signaling a new phase in U.S.-Saudi relations. The event featured a military band, aircraft flyovers, and a formal black-tie dinner. Speaking in the Oval Office, Trump highlighted major economic and defense agreements with the kingdom.
And I want to thank you because you've agreed to invest $600 billion into the United States. And because he's my friend, he might make it $1 trillion, but I'm going to have to work on him. But it's 600. We can count on 600 billion, but that number could go up a little bit higher. Yes, sir. I don't know. We'll see.
Your Royal Highness.
The Crown Prince confirmed plans to increase Saudi investment to nearly $1 trillion, spanning sectors including technology, artificial intelligence, and industrial infrastructure. On defense cooperation, Trump announced the U.S. will sell F-35 stealth fighter jets to Saudi Arabia, marking a significant policy shift in the Middle East. Regarding the Abraham Accords, the Crown Prince expressed Saudi interest in joining the initiative to normalize ties with Israel while ensuring a path toward a two-state solution. The visit emphasizes deepening U.S.-Saudi ties in economic, security, and diplomatic spheres, while signaling broader discussions on Middle East peace and cooperation.
Well, joining me now is Editor-in-Chief of the Liberium, Arthur Bloch. Arthur, thank you so much for coming in to speak to us.
Always a pleasure.
Fascinating this. Both Trump and MBS spoke of Saudi Arabia possibly joining the Abraham Accords. First, I want to ask you, how realistic is that, and what might a clear path look like to a two-state solution in that context?
Well, I think everything is a preparation for Saudi Arabia joining in the end the Abraham Accords, like United Arab Emirates did, Bahrain, etc. And yeah, if you see the friendliness of the two leaders, it looks almost like, this is now we're discussing this, and the next step will be discussing peace. And Saudi Arabia is a very, very influential country in the region, especially now Iran is marginalized, Syria has collapsed, Lebanon is in big trouble. So it is a logical next step, you would argue. And seeing the level these two leaders are on, I think it's going to happen sooner or later.
And one thing is that the two individuals themselves, clearly there's some warmth, some mutual appreciation between them. But the strategic implications for the Middle East, if a US-Saudi defense deal does become formalized, particularly if it sort of mimics a NATO-style commitment. Yeah. Just talk us through that.
Well, so Saudi Arabia is a huge country, and it was always a bit in competition with Iran, who was the let's say the power broker in the region. Now Iran has collapsed. It has been gradually happening in the past years, and what you see now is Saudi Arabia jumping in the vacuum. They are kind to the United States. If you saw the meeting yesterday, it was like an act in various places. You have the journalist who asked a nasty question, Trump gets angry, then you have Mohammed bin Salman saying, we're not going to invest 600 billion, but we make it 1 trillion. And it's like, they look like friends. And I think strategically speaking, it's for Mohammed bin Salman, it's crucial to join the Abraham Accords, because then he becomes the Arab nation that will lead the Middle East into the next 10, 15 years. It's inevitable.
What about Israel in all of this? The jet element, the F-35 jet deal, causing particular tensions with Israel?
Well, I think it's a bit for the show as well. I mean, everything you see is happening for a reason. So, as you saw, all these countries being topics. You have, Lebanon, Syria, and now you have Yemen still. There's a quarrel going on, and when this is resolved, then Mohammed bin Salman has a lot of strength to basically demand to the Israelis to listen. Now, if you want peace with us, then you have to give us something in return, and that return would be probably, if you follow him in the past years, a two-state solution, at least a path towards a two-state solution, and it can finally happen then. There's no more militias on the ground. Hamas is wiped out. Hezbollah is completely annihilated, and Syria is not an issue anymore. They have enough problems of their own. So I think it's going to happen, and I expect 6 months to a year before the end of Trump's term, so he can finally get that peace prize that he so eagerly wants to have.
And like as you've touched on, so many of these grand announcements we see, there is an element obviously of theatre and an element of more sort of substantive detail. Nevertheless, $1 trillion worth of investment, at least a portion of that must be substantive, significant.
Yeah, well, exactly. So Mohammed bin Salman said clearly, it's a broad package of investment in technology and of course of military equipment. It includes everything. $1 trillion. That's $1,000 billion, and it serves Trump's agenda as well, because there was a lot of criticism that he's not delivering upon economic promises. Well, now there you go, $1 trillion extra in the kitty. I mean, that's a serious investment.
Serious indeed. And what sort of risks do you think come with something like that? I mean, there's a huge number of geopolitical sensitivities. I mean, we've touched on some of them. With an investment of that magnitude, what are the political risks, do you think?
Well, listen, the political risk is like what happened in Qatar years ago when Trump was the president. He will be accused by the left that he is on a leash of the Saudi League or something. So you expect them to measure him to see, well, what's going to happen with the money? Is it true? Where's it going to be invested? I mean, there's a lot of unclarity now. But when the crown prince of Saudi Arabia confirms such an amount, it's going to happen, and it's a thorn in the eye of the Democrats and the opposition that Trump is facing. You saw it yesterday in the press conference, nasty questions towards the crown prince, rude, I would say, even, despite the fact that as a journalist, you have the right to ask whatever you want to write, but as a first question to insult a member of the royal family like that's definitely not done. It's unprecedented almost.
It was awkward and tense, wasn't it? You could feel that moment.
And then Trump, of course, beautifully saying it's a fake news media again. So it's like, it's a show, basically. It's interesting to watch from, I've been a journalist for over 30 years, and it has never happened that there's an American president that has been so criticized as Trump is, but it has also never happened that there's a US president that delivers. If you see what happened with the terrorists, multi-billions that came in, and it's all downplayed by the opposition, as if it's not there, if it's not happening. And now if you have a confirmation of a crown prince that the money is coming, it will be quite hard for the opposition to make something out of that.
Arthur, another contentious area was a signal by MBS that there could be Saudi support for a US-Iran deal. Yeah. How significant is this? I mean, that is a pivot, isn't it? And how, what do you think that could mean in substantive terms? Is this mostly a kind of rhetorical bit of positioning, or should we read something more material into that?
It's the start of a new era, basically. We had, for 40 years, a situation in the Middle East where it was sliced in half, basically. Even in a country like Lebanon, where I'm from, you had like the pro-Saudi, pro-Western side and the pro-Iranian Eastern, however you want to call it, but that's all vaporized now. So there needs to become a new, let's say, status quo, and this is slowly progressing now. You see, nothing can happen now if the Saudis are not on board. So it's crucial for America to get the Saudi support to make such a deal in the first place. And as for the Iranians, well, they have basically collapsed. The regime is on a thin thread, hanging on a thin thread, and I don't know if they're even going to make it until the end of Trump's term, because there's a lot of turmoil in Iran that we are not aware of. And it's a spectacular time to observe changing geopolitical changes in the region. And I expect there will be a deal, and I expect there will be peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and it will create a whole new dimension in the Middle East. And yeah, it's beneficiary for all the countries around Israel and for Israel itself, because they have done a lot of harm. I mean, especially to people in the West. They saw what happened in Gaza, and it is difficult to continue that for years to come. So they need some good news to say, look, we're not only going for war, but we're also actually pursuing peace. And yeah, I'm hopeful that it's coming into effect in the coming 2-3 years.
And talking of new dimensions, I mean, we've seen for years, haven't we, in the US and other countries, this area of human rights be brought up continuously as a criticism of Saudi Arabia. We saw the awkward moment, the question about Khashoggi, and I think for many years that particular incident has become almost emblematic of concerns about freedom of press and things of that nature. Do you think, has there been a sea change now? Do you think because of this positive relationship that MBS and his team have managed to allay some concerns in that area?
Well, I found it remarkable that he took the microphone and he said to Trump, well, I'm going to answer this question myself. So Trump was basically tried to cover it up a little bit, and then Mohammed bin Salman said, well, let me answer it. And I found his answer quite, well, pragmatic. And he said, well, there's a lot of accusations that he was the one who, but I have not seen any proof. There has been reports in the radical left media in the US that he was behind it. Well, I didn't see the proof. And it's very easy, of course, to say, well, he's the one who authorized it. But Saudi Arabia is a massive country, a large security apparatus, and there's a lot of rogue individuals. There were even assassination attempts to. So it's easy to say he's the one who orchestrated it, but prove it. I have not seen the proof, and I don't think the reporter who asked the question saw any proof. She was just there to try to embarrass Trump and to ruin a bit of the good thing that they have going on. That's how I interpreted it.
Very interesting stuff indeed. Arthur, we love hearing your analysis on AnewZ. Particularly nice to have you in the studio tonight. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay, after the break, Washington moves to force the Justice Department to finally release Epstein's sealed files. The House voted 427-1, and the Senate is fast-tracking it. But will the documents tell the full story or leave the key questions unanswered? Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching PrimeTime. The US Senate has approved legislation to force the public release of Justice Department files on the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The House of Representatives overwhelmingly approved the measure in a 427-1 vote, and the Senate unanimously fast-tracked it without a formal vote. Now, the move comes just days after President Donald Trump reversed his position and urged Congress to vote on whether to disclose the records following public pushback from many of his supporters. Here's more on that story.
US Congress overwhelmingly voted to force the public release of Justice Department files on the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein on Tuesday. Senators cleared the Epstein Files Transparency Act shortly after the House of Representatives passed its version of the bill in an overwhelming 427-1 vote.
But it is
The measure now heads to President Donald Trump for his signature, 2 days after he abruptly dropped months of resistance. On Monday, Mr. Trump endorsed Republicans' push to publish the Epstein records, calling it a Democrat problem.
That's what I want.
Before Tuesday's vote, around 24 women who say they were abused by Epstein gathered outside the Capitol alongside cross-party lawmakers, urging Congress to release the files holding childhood photographs of themselves. They later applauded and embraced each other in the House gallery as the measure was passed. Despite his change in stance, President Donald Trump has remained visibly irritated by questions on the matter. When pressed by an ABC reporter in the Oval Office, he called the journalist a terrible reporter.
You're a terrible person and a terrible reporter. As far as the Epstein files is, I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert. But I guess I turned out to be right.
Epstein admitted in 2008 to a felony offense involving a minor in Florida and spent 13 months in jail. And in 2019, he was later charged by the US Justice Department with trafficking underage girls, charges he denied before his death in jail in August 2019.
Well, joining me now to discuss this in more detail is the political scientist Daniela Mello, who's joining us from Boston in the United States. Daniela, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Firstly, and perhaps most importantly, why has it taken Congress just so long to make these records public?
Hello, and thank you for having me today. The answer to your question is quite simple. Donald Trump. It became very apparent very quickly when Pam Bondi, who leads the Department of Justice in the United States, started to signal to the American public that there was nothing to see in the Epstein files, no new information, no information of interest to the public, no list of people who may have used Epstein to also victimize young women. Once that became the narrative coming out of the Department of Justice, that came hand in hand with a very clear signaling from the president. He didn't really hide it from the public, that he didn't think that any more time should be spent talking about the Epstein files. This translated very quickly into high support within the Congress to vanishing support amongst the Republicans, with only 4 Republican women who are MAGA women standing their ground and saying that they would vote. So then there was a series of procedural mechanisms utilized to avoid this vote from coming into the House. And here, Speaker Mike Johnson, who's a Republican, basically delayed the swearing in of Adelita Grijalva, who won a special election in Arizona, because she would be the final vote to allow this petition to move forward. So this started to signal not just to Congress, but to the American people that perhaps there was something to hide. That became the story in and of itself. So in doing all of this pressure campaign to his own party, to his own most faithful representatives to stop this surge, what Donald Trump actually accomplished was to create a climate of mutiny almost within the MAGA movement. And he was defied, and effectively defied, for the very first time by members of his own party. And I mean, this is in some ways a critical moment because it is, as far as I can think, the only moment in which the president has really backed down from the stronghold that he has on his own movement, on his own representatives.
It's fascinating, isn't it? As you say, this is possibly one of the only major political misjudgments of his own core support. I mean, what do you think this means, the release of this files? What does it mean for Donald Trump now politically, do you think?
Well, it's still unclear why Donald Trump so strongly resisted, put so much of his own political and personal capital into resisting the release of these files, in part because we all know him to be a political animal with very strong instincts when it comes to maintaining his base happy. And here, he totally misread his own base, and he misread some of his own strongest supporters within the Republican Party. People like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert, who are the faces of MAGA movement in the House of Representatives. So the type of political cost that this will have is still unclear. But
And Daniela,
I think it's safe
sorry
to
to cut
say
across you.
that,
Sorry to jump in there, but do you
Sure.
think these comments most recently that we just heard in the package in the White House, where he was referring to Mr. Epstein as disgusting, I threw him out of my club, is this now an attempt to sort of backtrack or pivot on that sort of earlier bit of positioning that he did?
It's the same strategy that the president has always used to deflect attention and to deflect blame into other political actors. He's always also very quick to say that this is all a Democratic scandal, that it's a Democratic hoax. He calls a Democratic hoax the fact that there was such a push for the release of these files that are held by the Department of Justice. But he also says that Democrats are the ones that really need to be looked at because they were the best friends with Epstein, and that Epstein himself was making donations to the Democrats. So this has been his line of attack. It's unclear exactly how he is mentioned in these files that are held by the Department of Justice. It's also unclear, as I was saying, what motivates him to take this fight, to the extremes that he has. And one of the serious consequences that we see here is the consequence that this has had internally for the cohesion of the MAGA movement. So it remains to see to what extent this will really be a deep cleavage within MAGA, and whether this will open the door and open a precedent for more defections from the president hard line. Because thus far, this Congress has been completely complacent and in agreement, willing to really set aside any opposing views to the presidential position. So this could be a new chapter for the MAGA movement, or for the representation of the MAGA movement within Congress as well. And let's remember, some of these representatives, they're coming up for a vote next year in the midterm elections. So this is an interesting point of view for us to focus on as well. Why? Because they are really stuck between understanding whether or not their support for Donald Trump on the issue of Epstein would actually cost them votes at home. So we're finally seeing some defections. Whether those defections will be permanent remains to be seen. But what this also seems to signal is that these representatives understand that distance from Donald Trump on this particular issue will probably serve them better in the midterms.
And Daniela, just turning to the victims for a moment, of course, the most important part of this story. How have you seen the release impacting on the victims, on their supporters? Is there a sense that this in some small way starts to form some kind of justice, or has the reaction been sort of fairly muted?
The reaction has not been muted at all, and in fact, the victims have been very public. Many of the victims have been very publicly siding with the release of the records, an increase in transparency. I mean, from the point of view of many of the victims, the fact that this remains in the public eye is itself a form of trying to achieve some measure of justice, some measure of understanding and transparency, being able to impact society, thinks about this type of crime, who's committing this type of crime, and who the victims are. So that's very much an open discussion in American society with strong support, I would say, for Epstein's misdeeds and all of the people who participated with him in this type of crime to be brought to light and to be held responsible in the public eye, if not in court.
And just a word on Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of the key people who played a key role in pushing the Epstein Files Transparency Act. She obviously had a very public break with Trump. Trump has called her a traitor, amongst other things. How is she viewed in the community? How do the victims, their supporters, view her? And what could be the role for her to play going forward now following this break with the president?
Yeah, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has undergone a significant transformation in the public eye over the past few weeks. Some of that is met with cynicism, but some of it is also met with gratefulness that she is willing to stick her neck out there and be a voice for the victims. And she made sure that this was a message that she passed on to the American public as well, that, you know, she gave a press conference while she was being attacked by the president, being called a lunatic, amongst many other things, being called a traitor to the party, a traitor to the president, and receiving, according to herself, many death threats following those insults by President Trump to her and the singling out of her as a traitor to MAGA movement. So she has put herself at great political risk. This is quite a gamble for her, but it also seems like Marjorie Taylor Greene is trying to become more of a mainstream voice, but a mainstream voice for what she considers to be crucial MAGA values, what first attracted her to MAGA, and does this distancing and this separating between when she speaks about the president, saying, I helped elect this president. I was his strongest supporter. I sacrificed a lot for this president, but I don't serve the president. I serve this country and I serve God, because she's also, very open about her Christianity, and that she wants to basically have transparency, clarity. She takes the drain the swamp analogy that the president always uses, the sentence he frequently used about Washington. She takes it quite seriously. So she basically, directly and indirectly, saying that by hiding these files, the president is obscuring information from the American public, and that she will not stand by it. And that's a position that I would say many on the right and the left can support.
And finally, I just wanted to ask you about the Justice Department. We've spoken about the role that President Trump may have played in causing the long delay in the release of the files. What is your assessment of the performance, the effectiveness of the Justice Department's handling?
The Justice Department has effectively allowed itself to be politicized under the leadership of Pam Bondi. And that has become very clear, not just with the Epstein case, but for instance, with the attempt to prosecute known opponents of the president, and those who were involved in trying to bring him to court for trying to influence the results of the election 5 years ago. So Pam Bondi is loyal to Donald Trump. Even if Donald Trump did not pick up the phone and tell Pam Bondi, do this, stop this, track this. I mean, we don't know if that happened or didn't happen. I'm not, breaking news here on that issue. That Donald Trump has basically gone on television, spoke and said that there's nothing to see here and that he didn't want this to move forward. And suddenly we see a department that basically just aligns itself with the president and does subordinates the independence of advocates, really, the independence of the Department of Justice that should pursue justice for the sake of justice, not justice for the sake of pleasing the executive office. So it's hard to see how Pam Bondi saved space for the Department of Justice on this particular issue.
Daniela Mello, political scientist, we appreciate your analysis very much, and we thank you for joining us from Boston. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take a short break now. When we're back, Andy Mioch will be here with the very latest breaking business news stories of the day. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Prime Time now with the very latest business news. Andy Mioch is here. Andy, what's on the agenda today?
Well, Guy, tonight we'll be covering some supply chains, industry protections, and research breakthroughs, but we also have some consumer safety and aviation news as well. So, without further ado, we begin in the Netherlands. The Dutch government has paused its intervention in chipmaker Nexperia after talks with China, easing a dispute that led to shortages of automotive chips. The move comes as part of an effort to stabilize supply chains and restore cooperation with Beijing.
The Dutch government said on Wednesday it was suspending its intervention at computer chip maker Nexperia after what it said were constructive talks with China over a dispute which has led to shortages of chips needed by car manufacturers. The Dutch state took control at Nexperia on September 30th, saying the move was needed to prevent the company's former chief executive from moving its operations to China. Beijing responded by halting exports of Nexperia's finished products on October 4th, a measure it has since relaxed. Dutch Economy Minister Vincent Karamanz said on Wednesday that suspending the government intervention represented a gesture of goodwill, adding that talks will continue. Nexperia is a major supplier of basic computer chips to the car industry, and shortages of its chips following the dispute between the Netherlands and China have threatened automotive supply chains and led to production slowdowns and halts.
The recently imposed U.S. sanctions on major Russian oil producers are taking their toll in the north of Europe. Lukoil-owned Teboil in Finland plans to shut down its stations in phases as fuel supplies run out amid the sanctions.
Finnish petrol station operator Teboil, which is owned by Russian oil major Lukoil, said on Wednesday it is preparing to shut down its operations as fuel runs out amid US sanctions against its parent company. Teboil said in a statement that stations will close in phases once fuel stocks are sold out. The United States last month hit Lukoil with sanctions over Moscow's war in Ukraine, and the Trump administration on Friday gave clearance to potential buyers to talk to the Russian company about buying its non-Russian assets. Teboil has 430 stations in Finland, according to its website, or roughly 1/5 of the Nordic country's 2,250 stations, according to a 2024 report by an industry group. Teboil had on Monday said it expected Lukoil to sell the chain as part of the Russian group's ongoing effort to sell foreign assets. Finland's Financial Supervisory Authority last month said banks and other Finnish institutions subject to its regulations should exercise caution in dealing with Lukoil and companies directly or indirectly owned by it.
Now for some science news. Seattle's Allen Institute has launched a new AI platform that enables researchers to easily compare and analyze large brain datasets. This tool can help accelerate research on brain functions and diseases.
The Allen Institute in Seattle has released an artificial intelligence platform that lets scientists search and compare massive brain datasets as easily as looking something up online, the Institute said. The Brain Knowledge platform pulls together data from humans and animals, but its backbone is an unusually rich set of maps of the mouse brain. Over the past 2 decades, Allen and collaborators have built 3D atlases that chart where thousands of genes turn on across the mouse brain, how different cell types are distributed, and how brain regions connect and process visual information. The work brings together researchers from the Allen Institute in Seattle, Japan's Riken Center for Computational Science, Fujitsu, and other collaborators who helped run the mouse brain simulations on the Fugaku supercomputer. Researchers can now use the new tool to line up their own mouse experiments against those reference maps and against studies from other labs, allowing apples-to-apples comparisons of brain cells, circuits, and disease markers. Scientists say mouse brains are a crucial testing ground because they share most of their genes with humans, but are far easier to study in high detail. Previous projects have already created cellular resolution 3D reference brains and whole brain cell type atlases covering millions of mouse cells. Feeding those datasets into one AI system could speed up work on conditions from dementia to psychiatric disorders and help drug makers test ideas more quickly. The institute said that current supercomputers are still not powerful enough to simulate the human brain in the same detail, but that could change in the coming decades.
In the world of aviation, Etihad Airways announced plans to add 32 wide-body jets to its fleet, boosting its passenger target for 2030. The airline's investment comes at a difficult time for the industry, caused by supply challenges.
Etihad Airways on Tuesday laid out a series of deals that will add 32 wide-body jets to its growing fleet, lifting targets for fleet size and passenger numbers by 2030. The Abu Dhabi carrier is buying 6 Airbus aircraft and 9 will be leased from Dublin-based lessor Avalon as part of the order, which was announced during the Dubai Air Show. In recent years, airlines have struggled with aircraft deliveries amid increasing demand, as Boeing undergoes multiple crises and Airbus struggles with supply chain challenges. The airline is set to start receiving the A330s by 2027. Etihad is boosting its fleet and network to better compete with bigger Gulf carriers as Abu Dhabi diversifies its economy away from oil betting on sectors such as tourism. It now aims to fly 37 million passengers every year by 2030. It had previously said it would target 30 million passengers with a fleet 170 aircraft by the same year. Etihad also ordered 7 Airbus A350-1000, bringing its total for the type to 27 planes, and said it would add 10 A350F freighters to its fleet.
Over in France, a court dismissed a lawsuit seeking to withdraw Perrier mineral water over alleged misleading marketing, citing lack of urgent health risk.
A French court rejected on Tuesday a case against Nestlé's Perrier mineral water, brought by a consumers group who had demanded the sparkling water be withdrawn from markets. The court said there was not enough evidence of an urgent health risk or a clear violation of the law to justify such a drastic measure. Consumer group UFC Que Choisir had sought an emergency intervention over what it alleges is deceptive marketing of the brand as natural mineral water. The move was the latest development in an ongoing scandal surrounding the brand, since French media reported last year that Perrier and many other mineral water producers had been illegally treating their water to prevent contamination. An inquiry commissioned by France's Senate found in May that the French government had covered up the use of treatments for years. Nestlé said it regretted the use of the treatments and has since stopped using them, switching instead to microfiltration, which it says is safe and does not alter the mineral makeup of its water. However, the consumer group argues the microfiltration is another kind of treatment that has not been approved by authorities, and given its use to remove contaminants, suggests there could be a potential health risk. Famous for its teardrop-shaped, green glass bottles, Perrier has been produced from spring water in southern France since the late 19th century and marketed worldwide. Nestlé's Waters division has owned the brand since 1992.
And finally, the European Union has set import quotas on steel alloys containing manganese and silicon to protect local producers from a surge of cheap imports. The measures are set to last for 3 years as European producers struggle with foreign competitors selling at far lower prices.
The European Union set import quotas on Tuesday on alloys of steel containing manganese or silicon to protect domestic producers against a surge of cheap imports. The measures will last for 3 years and consist of country-specific quotas per type of ferroalloy, limiting the volume of imports that can enter the EU duty-free. Imports beyond the quotas may enter without duties if prices exceed established thresholds. If not, a tariff will apply to bring the final price up to the threshold level. The European Commission, which carried out an investigation, said that imports increased by 17% between 2019 and 2024, and the market share of EU producers fell to 24% from 38%. It concluded the surge of imports harmed EU industry. Europe's sector body said EU companies were struggling to compete with exporters from China, India and Kazakhstan that sold at significantly lower prices.
And that is a wrap on the business for today. Handing it back to you, Guy.
Fascinating selection as always. Andy, thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, tensions flare along the Lebanon-Israel border following a deadly strike on a Palestinian refugee camp near Sidon. Do stay with us.
It's often said the world never sleeps, but who's ready to wake you up with all you need to know about what is happening across the globe and in the region?
We are. Daybreak is live every morning, bringing you a complete wrap-up of the stories from overnight with all the news already happening in the world.
The biggest global headlines, the key regional developments, the must-read stories shaping the day.
We show them, we discuss them, we guide you through their meaning. We give you the news and a first look at the key headlines.
I'm Nadia Jani.
And I'm Lou Brown.
Join us, it's Daybreak here at AnewZ.
Welcome back. You're watching Prime Time. Now, tensions along the Lebanon-Israel border have surged again after a deadly strike at a Palestinian refugee camp near Sidon in southern Lebanon. Israel and Hamas are offering sharply different accounts of what was targeted, adding to the confusion and anger on the ground. Let's take a look.
13 people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike near the southern Lebanese city of Sidon. According to Lebanon's health ministry, several others were wounded. The blast hit the crowded Ain al-Hilwa Palestinian refugee camp, one of the most densely populated areas in the region. The Israeli military said it targeted militants operating inside what it described as a Hamas training compound. It said the site had been used to plan and launch attacks against Israel. Hamas strongly rejected Israel's claim. In a statement, it accused Israel of fabricating evidence to justify what it called criminal aggression. Hamas said the strike hit an open sports field used by local residents, insisting there are no military sites in Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon. Lebanon's health ministry said at least 4 people were injured in addition to those killed. Early reports indicated the strike hit an area outside a mosque that is often crowded in the evening. Israel has carried out frequent strikes in Lebanon since a ceasefire deal ended open conflict with Hezbollah. Most have targeted Hezbollah positions, but Israel has also struck locations linked to Hamas. The Israeli military said it used precision weapons and conducted aerial surveillance before the strike to reduce the risk to civilians.
Well, joining me now in the studio to discuss this further is AnewZ's Katie Wilson. Katie, terrible news there. What is the latest on the death toll and the condition of the wounded?
Yeah, so just to bring you the latest developments on that wider situation in Lebanon, Israel has carried out new attacks on southern Lebanon since, and according to reports, 3 buildings in 2 towns in southern Lebanon have been destroyed after Israel issued warnings 90 minutes beforehand. And obviously this is developing, so we'll bring you the latest as we know more. But what we know so far is from the Lebanese Ministry of Health, who is reporting that 13 people have been killed in the strike, and we're possibly expecting this to go up. That death toll is it's varying across different media, and according to the Health Ministry, at least 4 people were wounded, and some reports are indicating that dozens more have been injured. And local sources indicate that rescue teams are still working to rescue people trapped under the rubble, including reportedly 5 Hamas members. And local residents say the strike has killed mostly children at a sports playground. Now, that hasn't quite been verified. Al Jazeera are reporting on that, citing local residents. And a little bit about the circumstances of this strike. Israel says it targeted a Hamas training compound there. And Hamas is denying that this compound was a training site, calling this claim fabricated, but it's worth pointing out that this is all still very much ongoing. Ambulances are still transporting the wounded to nearby hospitals. We've seen footage on social media of this, and rescue operations that, as I say, they're ongoing, still searching through the rubble for more victims, and we are expecting more casualties to be confirmed as that rescue work continues, and local media certainly seems to be suggesting that. And because this site is densely populated and the strike reportedly hit a mosque and a car park, we are expecting some of those casualties to be civilians. And you know, that's if we look at those local media reports and generally the pattern of what happens with these strikes. But of course, Israel is saying this is a militant target.
And are we expecting a more extensive, more comprehensive explanation from Israeli officials at some point, Katie?
So we have heard from the IDF. The IDF says it struck a Hamas training compound within the camp, which it claims was used to train operatives to plan and carry out attacks against Israel. The Israeli military reportedly believed that many of those present were relatively junior operatives rather than senior Hamas leaders. And in the statement, the IDF says it used precision munitions, conducted aerial surveillance, and employed additional intelligence before carrying out the strike. So this was a planned operation, and again, we're hearing from the IDF that they were taking measures to reduce the chance of harm to civilians. Now, the IDF is framing this as part of a broader campaign against Hamas's establishment in Lebanon, and they say it's about dismantling Hamas infrastructure wherever it operates, so not just in Gaza, as obviously we hear so often. Now, Hamas has condemned the attack, and they've said it has no military installations in the Palestinian camps in Lebanon, and say that the site targeted an open sports field. They deny the site was a training compound and say the location was used by youth in the camp. And as I mentioned, they describe Israel's claim about training infrastructure in the camp as a fabrication to justify its criminal aggression. That's what Hamas has said. But, you know, given that this camp is densely populated and human rights organisations are arguing that even with these precision munitions and surveillance, there's still a high risk to civilians here. And of course, that's part of the broader debate about these strikes.
And you say they're densely populated, these camps. What do we know about these camps in terms of who actually lives there.
Yes, so this strike was on Ain al-Hinwe, and that's the largest Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. It has a population of over 70,000 Palestinian refugees originally, but then that swelled to nearly 120,000 as a result of an influx of refugees from Syria since 2011. Now, according to UNRWA, the camp's original inhabitants arrived in 1948, mostly from coastal Palestinian towns, and since then, Palestinian refugees displaced from other parts of Lebanon have also come here. And as I mentioned, over time, this population has grown, and today it houses tens of thousands of people, and it's extremely densely populated. And it's worth pointing out the structure of these camps. Now, the Lebanese armed forces, they're not allowed to enter any Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon, and that's because of a long-standing political agreement dating back to the 60s. So the aim for that is for Palestinian factions to have autonomy inside the refugee camps, and it means the internal security is handled by Palestinian groups rather than the Lebanese state. So under this framework, Lebanese forces have no right to enter camps without permission from Palestinian authorities. So we've got autonomous, densely populated and heavily armed areas here, meaning it is extremely volatile. And of course, this recent Israeli strike is likely to heighten internal tensions within the camps.
As you said at the top, Katie, different groups are obviously seeing this in slightly different ways. How are Palestinian factions, Lebanese authorities, international bodies, how are these different groups assessing what's happened so far?
So unsurprisingly, Hamas has been the strongest in condemning this. They say it hit an open sports field, not a military training site. They describe the attack as a brutal assault and accuses Israel of inventing the training compound to justify killing innocent Palestinians. So Hamas have condemned this really strongly. Lebanon, they've also sharply condemned this strike, and they're framing it as a breach of its sovereign territory. Some Lebanese political and religious groups are calling on the guarantor states of the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah last year. You know, that's notably the US, France, to pressure Israel and demand respect for the ceasefire deal. Lebanese authorities, they're emphasising diplomatic and political pressure rather than outright military retaliation, and you know that's likely because of this complicated security situation on the ground. Now, according to Euronews, government officials in Lebanon have characterised this attack as the deadliest since that ceasefire last year. The reaction from international bodies, that's still emerging, but international bodies, several key bodies and experts, they're already voicing concern and calling for investigations. And the key concern here is, of course, because it's reportedly hit a civilian area rather than a clearly identified military target. And we've got these opposing narratives from Israel and Hamas on what the area is and what it's for. So the key question is going to be whether this strike represents an escalation, or is it part of a pattern that we have seen since the ceasefire of Israeli strikes in Lebanon, and you know, does it fall within that framework?
Yeah, indeed. And where does all this leave us, do you think, Katie, in terms of destabilising potentially the ceasefire in southern Lebanon? What do we think is now most likely to happen?
Yeah, so if we go back to the 26th of November in 2024, when that ceasefire was agreed between Israel and Hezbollah, that was supposed to end violent attacks, but Israel has carried out regular airstrikes on people and places in Lebanon since this deal. Most of the strikes have targeted Hezbollah, this one's targeting Hamas, but Israel has also attacked Hamas in the country, as we're seeing now. And obviously we talk about this being a fragile ceasefire. We hear that a lot, and it's because within the ceasefire it allows both sides to act in self-defense, which is obviously quite open to interpretation, and it means these routine strikes on perceived threats could continue without necessarily being seen as a violation of the agreement. So there's questions over whether that clause and whether that breathing room, so to speak, helps sustain the truce in the short term, or whether we're on a bit of a slippery slope and it makes it easier for one side to justify re-escalation later. And there is a real risk that this strike could further erode this agreement in southern Lebanon, but whether it's going to spiral into a wider confrontation depends on the reactions of Hezbollah and Palestinian factions inside Lebanon. Hezbollah is is still the dominant armed actor in southern Lebanon, not Hamas. And that's the main party to last year's ceasefire with Israel. So an attack on a refugee camp in which has civilians, it does increase domestic pressure on Lebanon's political actors to demand a response. And, you know, if we get some quick diplomatic responses from the US, from the UN, or clear public restraint signals from Hezbollah or the leadership in Israel, that could well stabilise this situation. But of course, there are wider concerns that renewed Israel-Hezbollah exchanges could complicate the situation, and equally could that spill over into Gaza. And of course, within all of this, there's this massive humanitarian concern. So all to keep an eye on to see for latest developments.
Very, very delicate situation indeed. Katie, as always, thanks for staying on top of it for us.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, Ukrainian President Zelensky is in Ankara in an effort to restart talks aimed at ending Russia's full-scale invasion. We'll break down the diplomatic hurdles and what this means for the conflict. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Prime Time. In the Russia-Ukraine war, attention is once again on Ankara as hopes for peace resurface. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Turkey today, aiming to push talks forward. Meanwhile, Russia hit multiple Ukrainian cities with missiles and drones overnight, killing at least 25 people.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is visiting Turkey as part of renewed efforts to revive talks with Russia on ending the war. This marks his third trip to Turkey this year. During his visit to Ankara, Zelensky met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. On Tuesday, Zelensky announced a series of key international meetings this week, including Wednesday's talks in Turkey. He said the discussions would focus on intensifying diplomatic efforts and presenting Ukraine's latest proposals to its partners. Ankara will be the fourth capital Zelensky visits in only a few days. In Athens, he secured a gas deal. In Paris, he signed an agreement to obtain up to 100 fighter jets. And in Madrid, he held talks on cooperation with Spanish arms manufacturers. Turkey previously hosted negotiations between Kiev and Moscow, though earlier rounds produced no breakthrough. As Zelensky headed to Turkey, Moscow and Kiev exchanged a wave of drone and missile strikes overnight. Ukraine says it used US-supplied ATACMS missiles to hit military targets in Russia. Moscow says flights were briefly halted at airports in the capital city and Krasnodar after Ukrainian drones were intercepted. And Russia launched a large-scale overnight attack on the eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv and western city of Ternopil, killing dozens of civilians. Zelensky said Russia had fired more than 470 drones and 47 missiles, causing significant destruction. Power outages were reported across several regions, according to Ukraine's energy ministry.
Joining me now to discuss this further is our very own Orkan Amashov. Orkan, it's good to have you here with us in the studio. Just recap for us then, what are the main obstacles ultimately preventing direct talks between Zelensky and Putin? And how do you think current developments might start to shape these Ankara meetings?
Well, there has been no direct talk between Russia and Ukraine since March 2022. And the last occasion of this kind was in March in Turkey, indeed. But nothing ultimately in a fundamental sense of this word eventuated from that. There were different factors. Well, first of all, Russians do not accept Zelensky. Let's be very clear about it. They question his legitimacy. They believe that there should be government change, new election. He's not legitimate to sign anything. So there's rejection of President Zelensky as a legitimate leader of a sovereign country. Number one factor. Number two, they believe that Direct talk may potentially happen only at a later stage when all of those key details have been agreed upon, where tripartite structures by means of the use and good offices of third-party mediators, and then only direct talk between Ukraine and Russia could take place. Ultimately, Russians do not accept Zelensky. And also their conditions are incredibly unacceptable from the Ukrainian point of view. Russia believes that there should be certain preconditions, and those preconditions involve Ukraine effectively, de facto, accepting the territorial gains of Russia within the 20% scope of Ukrainian territory as legitimate. This is completely unacceptable for Kiev. And also they want that effectively, that dividing line to be effective border. And these things are not acceptable for Ukraine. So basically, Russia is very demanding, and they don't accept Zelensky as a legitimate leader. And also, of course, technically, it would be completely impossible for a leader of a sovereign country, for Volodymyr Zelensky, to accept those concessions, to go for those concessions. What we see is absolutely clear. Russia is bombarding the critical infrastructure of Ukraine. What Russia is doing is application of force in order to achieve political result, and it will be completely unacceptable for Ukraine. So basically it is the circumstance on the ground, and for Ukraine to be able to talk directly to Russia, circumstance on the ground, the battlefield circumstance should favor them, because you can only achieve peace if military situation favors you, and it doesn't, Ukraine, at this stage.
Absolutely critical role for Turkey then, as host, as mediator, a country with an impressive range of skills and abilities when it comes to hosting difficult debates, talks, conflict resolution. Talk to us about the current situation and how Turkey is looking to approach these next few days.
Very good point, Guy. Turkey is a rising power. The fact that it's a rising power is visible in terms of its engagement in South Caucasus, in the Middle East. The Gaza peace deal would have been impossible without Turkey's role. We all understand that. And my feeling is that any form of peace formula, which we can conditionally call ceasefire plus, which is not going to be proper peace deal, but more than ceasefire, will not happen without Turkey's active involvement. And the United States is fully cognizant of this reality, and US supports active Turkish engagement. Turkey, effectively, Ankara, is the only country, is the only power center that can actually talk to both Kiev and Moscow, and has good relations with the United States. In fact, they are allies as long as NATO and many other elements are concerned. So no other country can actually boast this diplomatic dexterity, if to use your favorite word, and this sort of capabilities, range of skills, as you mentioned very rightly, this scope of competence. There are limitations on what Turkey can achieve, of course. Turkey and the United States are to act within the same framework. Turkey is providing fortuitous ground, bringing sides together, and there are some instances revealing Turkish prowess, diplomatic prowess. The grain deal, prisoner exchange, ability to bring Ukrainian and Russian delegations to some form of compromise at a difficult moment is something Turkey has proven itself as a competent actor. But Turkey needs the harsh power of the United States, because effectively, if you're talking about this peace deal, and if we want to be fair and we need to sort of retain our analytical fairness, we need to understand that US, for example, is trying to present a picture of being a neutral actor. So that means they should not be on the side of Ukraine. And Turkey has got the same propensity. Turkey supports Ukraine's territorial integrity, including Crimea. This is essential, but Turkey does not support Ukraine militarily in the same way as European countries are doing. Turkey is buying Russian oil and gas. Turkey is not part of that sanctions regime levied against Russia. But simultaneously, Turkey is limiting Russia's influence within the wider region. This is what all of these things together cumulatively make Turkey a unique actor, which it is.
And what about the involvement, or rather the lack of involvement, of Russian officials in the talks? What should we read into? Do you think that this is going to be problematic? Is it going to be impossible to really move forward productively without that?
The information coming from the White House earlier was suggesting that Steve Witkoff will be there, special envoy, and by the end of this week there will be some sort of agreement between Russians and Ukrainians in a very as a very complicated compromise. Nothing has come out of that particular proposal. My feeling is that that 26 or 28 point plan presented by the United States has not been accepted by Ukraine. So that we do not really know the content of that document. The content there, I imagine, on the basis of what we heard, should entail four components. One is the peace in Ukraine, so the battle, so effectively when I say peace, I mean ceasefire on the ground. Number two, security guarantees. Number three, situation involving Europe and Russia. And number four, United States relations, respective relations with Ukraine and Russia. Impression given is that Russia is happy with the component number four, and therefore they can become sort of forced into some form of compromise at a later stage. But my feeling is that if we look at this problem, this issue, this war, ongoing war of attrition, from Washington's perspective and from the Western perspective in general, and we don't have a unified Western perspective now, as of early 2025, there are two components. You have to increase support given to Ukraine. Support is there, but it's not increasing. It's not sufficient. And we saw it in the context of Tomahawk conversation. US is unwilling to give the kind of support that could enable Ukraine actually to liberate its occupied territories, which are internationally part of Ukraine. And number two factor is increase crippling sanctions imposed on Russia, forcing it into some form of compromise. There, in the second element, within the second compartment, there could be some progress. Russia has so far proven to be incredibly resilient, but they are not as resilient as they appear to be, or they want the world to believe that they are resilient. And I think that some of the sanctions could force them into compromise. But time will show. Basically, just to sort of sum up, this is not a bilateral negotiation. It's a bilateral engagement between Turkey and Ukraine. And in the context of the war in Ukraine, as far as my view is concerned, I think it's negotiations about negotiations rather than being negotiations per se.
Very interesting indeed. Of course, whilst these negotiations about negotiations
yes,
are happening, there is an intensification of Russian assaults on Ukraine. We've seen the pictures of that. Winter is approaching. The practical conditions that people are facing obviously are going to play some kind of role in potentially influencing decisions, do you think, that are taken?
But Russia, this is a set of measures taken by Russia to improve their own battlefield circumstances. So they're advancing on the battlefield. They're advancing, but not sufficient, with a sufficient rate of fastness, of course, but they're advancing. If they advance with this rate, they will be able to occupy entire Ukraine probably by 2090. So that means that they're actually not doing very well indeed. So that the notion of success, what does actually success mean in this particular case, is a very relative notion. As far as the internal Ukrainian situation is concerned, President Zelensky is still popular. I think 69% of the population, according to the latest polls, support the current leader, incumbent leader, but also the number of substantial majority of society at this stage, unlike what was the case back in 2022, 2023, believes that not victory at all costs, but negotiated settlement to achieve peace should be the line of action, the course of action. And therefore, I think Ukrainian society, in a way, is preparing for some sort of concessions. The bottom line here is that Russia is not going to retract from those territories. Russia is not going to withdraw its forces from those territories. The formal recognition of Russian control will not happen, but that dividing line will be accepted as a sort of a demarcation line. There will be demilitarized zone, and Ukraine will get some sort of guarantee that whatever is left of Ukraine, that fundamental bulk, 80%, will be properly protected. I think also there is an element of pressure on Russia, on Russian economy. All of those sanctions, and two Russian companies were actually sanctioned companies as of today, from which it emerged with elegant inevitability that in the same way Ukrainian society, Ukrainian political establishment is under massive pressure, Russia also feels every bit of that pressure, and they are simply not revealing the extent of the damage that they've suffered, and they are suffering at this precise moment in time.
As there is this push towards some kind of ceasefire, or can, and we've spoken about Turkey, we've spoken about the United States. How does this puzzle of international actors fit together? Of course, we've got the EU in the background too. Who is really pulling the levers at this stage?
I think the major actors are United States, then probably European Union. I would classify them number 2, and of course, and then Turkey, major actor within this entire process. European Union still follows the self-same policy, saying that Ukraine and Russia should not be allowed to defeat Ukraine, should not allowed to, so you can't legitimize aggression effectively. But basically everybody is realistically thinking about some sort of compromise for the time being. I believe that there will be no peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. There could be something similar to ceasefire. And in many ways, neither Russia nor Ukraine will emerge as a victor. I think China may emerge potentially as a victor, because the Chinese position is very interesting. So your question was about a wide international landscape. Effectively, China does not want peace between Russia and Ukraine, because that means that the United States afterwards will be able to actually allocate enough diplomatic, military, political resource in order to tackle Chinese problem in the US mindset. And they also do not want Russia to defeat Ukraine as well, because within their own balance between China and Russia, which are technically official allies, China wants weakened Russia reliant on China in order to increase its own clout. Simultaneously, China is massively benefiting from this current situation wherein US and West are focused on Russia, which means that they can't allocate enough resources to deal with China. Simultaneously, Russia is being weakened considerably and incrementally, changing the balance between those two in favor of China. China is a winner. I think we need to look at it from a very sort of sober point of view. Turkey is also in a winning position in many ways. So when United States of America and Russia need to achieve certain compromise regarding Ukraine, Turkey will be an important actor there. I think, I'm saying it from the pure analytical point of view, this part of the world, South Caucasus also, when the war in Ukraine started, it was a massive risk for this region. But whenever something bad happens, something which is potentially dangerous, you have to make sure that you understand the scale of the danger and transform whatever is dangerous into positivities. And actors in this region achieved a number of things during this period. Azerbaijan recovered its territorial integrity fully, peace deal with Armenia in the offing. Russia is unable to interfere with the interregional dynamics here. I'm not suggesting that that would not have happened had the war in Ukraine not been the case. What I'm saying is that whenever there is an element of risk, you have to tackle it and transform it into something positive for your own national interests.
Very interesting indeed. Orkan, always a pleasure to hear your analysis. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll be taking a look at the very latest social media stories with AnewZ's Guli Garadagli. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Prime Time. Now, Guli Garadagli is with us to dive into the world of social media. Guli, what's on the agenda today?
A lot has been happening around the world, so let's jump in and get started. Things escalated again between Russia and Ukraine overnight. Both sides launched drone and missile strikes, and Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, was hit especially hard. Here's what happened.
Russia and Ukraine exchanged a wave of drone and missile strikes overnight, hitting cities on both sides of the front. Russian drone attack on the eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv killed 9 people, wounded dozens more, and damaged energy and transport infrastructure. The attack hit the city during the night, damaging several buildings and causing fires. According to Mayor of Kharkiv and the regional military administration, Ukraine says it used US-supplied Attack-MS missiles to hit military targets in Russia. Moscow says flights were briefly halted at airports in the capital city and Krasnodar after Ukrainian drones were intercepted. Officials also say 4 drones were shot down on their way to the capital.
Meanwhile, across the world, Japan woke up to devastating news. A huge fire tore through an entire neighborhood overnight, destroying more than 170 buildings. Residents were forced to flee, while 1 person is still missing.
With the sound of all those fire trucks coming one after another, I thought, what's going on? When I looked out from the second floor window, the flames were already raging.
And as we already touched on today, something pretty significant happened in Washington. The bill that would force the Justice Department to release Epstein files got a unanimous approval from the U.S. Senate. Let's take a look.
Well, Mr. President, Donald Trump has tried to cover up for Jeffrey Epstein long enough. It's time that the Senate finish the job to finally compel the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files. A few hours ago, the House of Representatives passed their Epstein bill with as lopsided as a vote as you can get, 427 to 1. It's now the Senate's turn. In a few moments, I will ask unanimous consent for the Senate to pass the Epstein bill as soon as it comes over from the House. My unanimous consent request guarantees that the Senate will immediately pass the Epstein Files Transparency Act without any further action as soon as it comes over from the House. This isn't about Democrats versus Republicans or about Congress versus the President. This is about giving the American people the transparency they've been crying for. This is about holding accountable all the people in Jeffrey Epstein's circle who raped, groomed, targeted, and enabled the abuse of hundreds of girls for years and years. The American people have waited long enough. Jeffrey Epstein's victims have waited long enough. Let the truth come out. Let transparency reign. And I urge my Republican colleagues, let the Senate act today.
Over in Bolivia, things have been pretty heartbreaking. Heavy rains triggered massive flooding and basically turned an entire town into mud. The president has now been to the scene while rescue crews are working non-stop to clear the street and look for the people who still haven't been found.
It carried me away. Over my bed, the water swept me off. It tossed me around until I grabbed onto the only post that's there tied up. That's how far it dragged me.
Se ha declarado, si no me equivoco, desastre, lo cual eso ya...
If I'm not wrong, the disaster situation has been declared. Tonight I'm going to release a report. Yesterday afternoon and night we were speaking with international institutions. Unfortunately, Bolivia doesn't have money as they spent it all, but we got external resources to support the Samaipata town and communities like this one.
Now moving to something completely different. Last night, the White House basically turned into the most unexpected dinner party ever. Cristiano Ronaldo, Elon Musk, top politicians, tech billionaires, all sitting down together as President Donald Trump hosted Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. You know, my son is a big fan of Ronaldo, wherever Ronaldo is here. Ronaldo. And Barron got to meet him, and I think he respects his father a little bit more now. Just the fact that I introduced you. So I just want to thank you both for being here. Thank you very much.
And what would you do if you were casually surrounded by half the Forbes list? Exactly. Ronaldo did what any normal person would do, pulled out his phone and took an iconic selfie. The photo naturally quickly took over social media. And you know, sometimes a meeting starts normal and then somehow turns into a $1 trillion conversation. Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman were chatting about tech, AI chips, investments. Let's see how it went.
Now you're saying to me now that the 600 billion will be 1 trillion.
Definitely, because what we are signing, it will facilitate that, and we
I like
will
that
build
very
on
much. Go ahead. You worked hard. We appreciate it very much. So Saudi is going to be investing at least $600 billion, and that means investments in plants, in companies, money on Wall Street, and what it really means for everybody that really counts is jobs, a lot of jobs. We have a lot of jobs. So I just want to thank you. We've been really good friends for a long period of time. We've always been on the same side of every issue.
I believe, Mr. President, today and tomorrow we're going to announce that we are going to increase that $600 billion to almost $1 trillion of investment, real investment and real opportunity by details in many areas. And the agreement that we are signing today in many areas in technology, in AI, in earth materials, magnet, etc., that will create a lot of investment opportunities.
So you are doing that now. You're saying to me now that the 600 billion will be 1 trillion.
Definitely, because what we are signing, it will facilitate that, and we
I like
will
that
build
very
on
much. Go ahead. You worked hard. No, that's great. I appreciate that. That's great. We're doing numbers that nobody's ever done. And in all fairness, if you didn't see potential in the U.S., you wouldn't be doing that.
Definitely.
You don't want to lose money.
As you said, Mr. President, it's the most hottest country in the planet.
On a lighter note, over in the UK, Princess Catherine made a rare and highly anticipated return to the stage, delivering her first live speech since her cancer diagnosis last year. The Princess of Wales spoke at the Future Workforce Summit in London, focusing on a cause that has defined much of her humanitarian work, the well-being of young children. It's a major moment in her return to public life and a continuation of the mission she's built through the Royal Foundation.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for being here today. I believe in restoring the dignity to the quiet, often invisible work of caring, of loving well, as we look to build a happier, healthier society. You are here because you care, so thank you.
And speaking of big moments, something pretty big happened in the art world last night, and the art world sure loves a big moment. A Gustav Klimt artwork just got sold for $205 million, making it the priciest modern artwork ever auctioned.
$200 million. $200 million. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. We're here at $200 million, at $205 million. And the hammer is coming up, ladies and gentlemen. I think this is it. At $205 million. Here it is for this Elizabeth Lederer portrait, only at Sotheby's, here in the Breuer. The Klimt, Julian, is yours. Congratulations. 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 Thank you, David. Thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you.
That's all I've got for you today. Don't forget to check our website at AnewZ.tv, and as always, check us out on all of the social media platforms. Back to you, Guy.
Thank you, Gilly. It'd be fascinating, wouldn't it, to know the names of all the people bidding on the end of those phones. Fantastic selection as always. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, now here's another thing that's been trending online. The Cambridge Dictionary has named parasocial its word of the year. Well, defined as a one-sided relationship someone feels with a famous person they don't know, parasocial relationships are increasingly becoming common. From fans following Taylor Swift's engagement to people confiding in AI bots or podcast hosts, the term has grown from an academic concept in 1956 to a social media phenomenon today. And experts say its popularity reflects how digital culture is reshaping human connection. Well, joining me now to discuss this in more detail is culture and lifestyle journalist Furva Shah. She's in London. Furva, fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you very much for joining us. This is a fascinating topic, this, isn't it? How have media platforms, streaming platforms, the way in which we now all sort of live our lives on social media, how do you think that's contributed to the rise of these parasocial relationships?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me firstly. And I think with the rise of social media in particular, we're closer to celebrities now more than ever. We can see where they're eating for dinner, we can see where they're going for lunch and the friends and family that they have. And I think while that can make us feel closer to a celebrity that we admire, it can also have negative impacts too.
Very interesting indeed. And cultural impact, psychological impact, I mean, is there any sort of downside to this? Is this, to some degree, are people sort of kidding themselves, living in delusion, if you like, that when they believe that they're really in relationship with these famous people?
Yeah, I think that is the negative downside, as you just explained, that people have these boundaries with celebrities that are constantly being blurred because of social media. So rather than just admiring a celebrity from afar, you often see examples, for example, Ariana Grande recently, she was kind of accosted on a red carpet for her recent film. And I think that situations like that are because of a rise of these parasocial relationships. People feel like they are close to these people, they feel like they're their friends, their family, but ultimately they are ultimately strangers. But when it comes to these situations where these celebrities are in front of them, boundaries can get really, really drawn and lines can be crossed.
And also, in terms of the celebrities, there's a lot of onus on celebrities too, isn't there? That they actually have to put the effort in now to, in a sense, interacting with millions of people. Yeah. Questions can come from any source. They really, you have to be in actual relationship with your followers. It must place a huge burden on those celebrities and their teams.
100%. I think many celebrities, Halsey is a good example, has come out and said that the pressure to be on social media to promote their work constantly, to interact with fans, can have a negative impact on them too, because it's less about the music, TV shows or films that they're creating and more about how they can ultimately have these parasocial relationships in order to gain more traction to their current project, which can be stressful for the celebrities themselves too, because it's not natural. It's not a natural reaction to kind of interact with people every single day. And these people are ultimately strangers to them too, so it can be quite a difficult dynamic to maintain.
And further, where's this going, do you think? I mean, there's an awful lot of concern about the time that we're all spending on social media, the extent to which that at times perhaps we're forgetting to sort of be in the now, in the real world, so to speak. Are you expecting some kind of correction to this, or is this a trend that's just going to sort of continue and continue?
I would hope that there'd be a correction. I think it is worrying the amount of time we're all spending on our phones. We all know so much about many of these celebrities despite never interacting with them in real life. So I think there can be pros and cons. The pros are that people can find community amongst fandoms and find connections that are genuine. But I think the cons, like you mentioned, is that kind of constant social media use, constantly being aware. And I think that can pose real long-term problems. So hopefully there will be a shift. I think we all need to maybe spend a little bit less time on our phones. But I think in terms of people and their relations with celebrities, if boundaries aren't in place, if people aren't communicating them, particularly higher ups in these big industries, I think the lines can be further blurred, unfortunately.
And, you know, we've been seeing tonight various stories, the tech billionaires at the White House. I mean, how much responsibility do the tech giants bear in all of this? And what would you be looking to those giant tech companies for when it comes to helping us all, both the fans and the celebrities, navigate sort of through this?
I think tech companies bear a lot of responsibility, not just in terms of celebrities, but again, the fans that are following them and the safeguarding issues that come into play there. Because ultimately, a lot of these fans are quite young, usually young women, who are probably trying to find community, probably trying to kind of just, you know, can interact with celebrities that they love, but that's when the lines can be blurred, when people are, especially celebrities, are posting so much on social media, so much of their lives. And I think the role that tech giants have to play is maintaining privacy and maintaining good boundaries with the people that are using their products, because ultimately they are wanting us to use their products more and more, and they're making that a lot much easier. So I think it's important for big tech giants to think about the user, and especially young users who are getting so addicted to their phones and constantly scrolling. I think that can have a really negative impact on the brain and for wider society.
And finally, further, what about governments in all of this? I mean, it's very difficult to regulate, of course, things that are online because the content crosses so many geographic boundaries. But do you think there's a role for government to get a little bit more involved in trying to sort of regulate and help us manage these relationships?
I agree that governments do have a role to play. I think it is. Social media platforms do have age restrictions, but I think people can very easily put fake information in. So unless there are more checks to ensure that people are 14, 18 and above using these platforms, then maybe that can be a way of that can be a solution. But it is a difficult one because ultimately we are all on social media. We all want to be connected. We want to know what our friends are doing and our families, and therefore celebrities too when you go further down the line. I think governments do have a role to play, but it depends on how closely people will stick to those rules.
Further Shah, culture and lifestyle journalist, we thank you very much indeed for your analysis and for joining us from London. Okay, now let's go to some other news. Families in Sarajevo are calling for justice decades after losing loved ones to sniper fire during the Bosnian War. A new investigation in Milan into alleged Italian shootings, which were called Sniper Safari in Sarajevo, has reignited hope among survivors as painful memories of the siege resurfaces. The probe marks the first major step in decades towards accountability for those responsible.
For years, survivors have demanded an inquiry into allegations that wealthy Italians assisted Serb forces in mass killings during the 1992 to 1995 Bosnian War. And now, families in Sarajevo who lost loved ones to sniper fire have renewed their call for justice. The issue was highlighted in international media in 1995 under headlines such as Sniper Safari in Sarajevo, but no official action was taken. Earlier this month, Milan's prosecutor's office opened a case, reigniting long-buried hopes for many families. The investigation is into accusations Italians allegedly paid members of the Bosnian Serb army for trips to Sarajevo to kill people. This was one of the darkest periods of the city's siege, when residents faced relentless shelling and systematic sniper attacks. More than 11,500 civilians, including more than 1,600 children, were killed. For Fatima Popovac, losing her 6-year-old child was unimaginable.
I cannot understand how someone could kill a child for amusement. What harm could a 6-year-old possibly have done? I cannot even imagine that those who carried this out could be human. I wish I could see that monster, what they look like, what they resemble. Do they have no humanity? I cannot wish harm on anyone, even the person who killed my child. God willing, my son will be waiting for me in paradise.
Founder of the Sniper Alley project, Zemil Hodzic, documented the wartime crimes. His 16-year-old brother Amel was killed during the siege.
I would call them murderers. I would call them terrorists. I would call them like killers. Yeah. It says a lot about the world who is interested in this case now because the prosecutor is trying to do the investigation in Italy. But we have known some cases and many other cases with Russians and Greeks, and actually no one did much about it. The fact that we have to fight, we cannot give up. My brother was killed 30 years ago, I'm 42 now. And this mission and the fight for the truth and for the evidence is a lifetime mission, I would say it. And I know they would love me to just shut up. And
in 2021, newly released footage showing snipers targeting civilians reignited painful memories and highlighted the enduring trauma. For survivors, the Milan investigation represents the first significant step in decades towards uncovering the full extent of the alleged sniper-for-hire activities.
Concerns are growing over reports that the Indian government is targeting Sikh communities abroad. From surveillance and intimidation to alleged violence, Sikhs in Canada, the United States and Europe say they face coordinated pressure simply for speaking out about their religion and political beliefs.
What happens when a government's power reaches beyond its borders to control the lives of its own people, even those living thousands of miles away? For Sikhs, India's influence is no longer confined to Punjab or other regions at home, where they have faced political pressure, surveillance, and restrictions on religious and cultural expression. Sikhs report being watched, questioned, or intimidated simply for speaking out.
It's a well-known fact that the Indian government keeps an eye on Sikh communities, not just in Canada, but around the world. And that, for me, I'm personally not concerned, but my brothers and sisters who have sacrificed their entire lives fighting for the movement, which is actually a human rights movement. If you think about it, religion aside, it is a political ideology based on freedom, justice, sovereignty for all humanity, regardless of caste, creed, color, gender, ethnicity, or even religion. And those are values that India does not respect or honor.
These actions appear coordinated and politically motivated, prompting warnings from Canada, the United States, and European governments. The roots of this tension lie in India's post-independence period. After independence in 1947, Sikhs sought constitutional protections for their language, religion, and regional autonomy. Culminating in Operation Blue Star in 1984, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's assassination and anti-Sikh violence, events that profoundly shaped India's security policies and its relationship with the Sikh community. The Khalistan movement, advocating an independent Sikh homeland in Punjab, became a central focus of India's counter-terrorism policies. While largely a domestic concern in the 1970s and 1980s, the migration of Sikhs abroad brought the issue onto the international stage. As the diaspora became politically active, India's security interests sometimes extended internationally.
There is no way we can live with India anymore. We want our Khalistan, and that is the safest place for Sikhs to live and Sikhism to grow up also, to prosper us. We cannot prosper our Sikhism in India anymore.
Analysts say much of this pressure stems from the Hindu nationalist ideology, Hindutva, which underpins Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government and has increasingly shaped state policy toward non-Hindu communities. Evidence from international bodies and Sikh organizations highlights coordinated methods targeting Sikhs abroad. Extraterritorial violence, including killings and assassination attempts, surveillance of activists, visa denials, and so on. These tactics affect individual well-being, community cohesion, and democratic participation. Prompting FBI safety warnings in the U.S. freedom of expression is constrained. The UN Human Rights Committee in July 2024 reviewed India's record and highlighted violence and discrimination against Sikhs and other minorities. It criticized long-applied counter-terrorism laws in disturbed areas, citing unlawful killings, arbitrary detention, sexual violence, forced displacement, and torture. The committee urged India to align security measures with international standards and to address past violations. Global concern intensified after the 2023 assassination of Canadian Sikh leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Canadian authorities cited credible evidence suggesting involvement by individuals linked to the Indian state. Testimony to the U.S. Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission details a campaign of transnational repression against Sikhs in North America. This combination of historical grievances, diaspora activism, and alleged transnational repression illustrates the complex intersection of politics, identity, and security. Sikh communities continue to stress the importance of cultural, religious, and political expression while navigating growing transnational pressures.
Well, that's all we have tonight on Prime Time. Please do join us tomorrow for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at AnewZ, thanks for being with us.